Hi everyone. In this video, I want to talk about an Excel VLOOKUP versus doing a merge on Power Query versus using the related function on DAX. We are working with a very simple data set. What I have here is a list of 5 product IDs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and each of them have a list price. And then in the transactional data, we have a sales data set where I have the product ID. Each of them is appearing multiple times. And I also have the quantities sold. So if I want to know the total sales, all we have to do is to write equal to VLOOKUP, or we can even use XLOOKUP, that would be easier. So we're doing XLOOKUP. Now, what is the lookup value? It is the product ID. The lookup array will be on the other sheet in column A, comma, the return array will be column B. So you can see it tells us the list price for each of these 5 product IDs. So 10, 40, 30, 20, and 25 like this. And then I would also want to multiply this by the quantity. So we can say this is my list price and my total sales will be nothing but B2 colon B16 multiplied by C2 hash, and that tells us the total sales. Now, it is also possible that you might want to group all of these total sales value to see the total sales for each of the 5 products. So I'm going to put in a unique and then simply write SUMIF, where the range is column A, the criteria is G2 hash, and the sum range is column E. And that's very simple. It tells us that the total sales for product ID 1 is 690, for product ID 2 is 1800, and so on and so forth. So once again, we did the XLOOKUP, we multiplied it by the quantity, and then we did a unique and the SUMIF. There are a few different approaches you can take towards this. So you could have done a SUMIF directly on the product ID and then multiply, but it's still a lot of work, right? And doing this on Power BI makes it easier. Let's see how to do this in Power BI, everyone. So I'm going to first save this on my desktop. Perfect. Let's go to Power BI. I will first connect to the same data set. So Excel workbook. And then we are selecting files, Power BI, individual, and then related. Now we are working with 2 sheets, so make sure to select both of them. So I'm going to select the product ID and sales, and we will go to transform data. This will take us directly to Power Query. And here you can see that I have my product ID and sales. The sales being the fact table. This is the transactional data. I want to do a merge here. So we will go to merge queries. And I want to merge my sales with the product ID table. The matching columns are product ID and product ID. And this becomes a many to one relationship. Click on OK. Expand the table. We don't need the product ID since we already have it. We are only interested in the list price. And as you can see, it tells us the list price. To multiply both of these, add column, custom column, and let's call it my total sales. And that would be equal to quantity multiplied by the list price. And that gives us the total sales like this. Now, if you want to group it directly in Power Query, you can do that. Otherwise, you can do it in a visualization as well. So if you wanted to do this in Power Query directly, let me just create a duplicate query. Then I can do a group by. So we go to transform, and then we select group by. And here I will say that I want to group the product ID. We want to call this the product ID total sales, and we want to sum up the total sales column like this. And as you can see, it tells us the total sales for each of the 5 products. If you did not want to group it in Power Query, you could have done it in a visualization as well. All right. So to do this in a visual, let me just make a table. I'll make the table. And then in the table, I'm going to keep my product ID and the total sales. And as you can see, the product ID here is coming individually for each one of these. And I'm not really sure why that is happening. Let me just check that. Go to transform data and check that. So we would like our product ID to be a text. And we would also like our total sales to be a whole number. I think that should fix it. So we close and apply. And we would now also want to change the total sales from don't summarize to a sum. And as you can see, we get 690, 1800, 1050, 1000, and 1275. Okay, so that's one way of doing it, which is to do a merge in Power Query and then get the result like this. Now I want to show you yet another way of doing this. So I'll open a new Power BI file. We will again connect to the same Excel file. So related. And this time we want to create a relationship. So we select both of these and we go to load. We don't want to take it to Power Query. We simply want to load it. And now when we go to the modeling view, you will notice in this case that the relationship was created automatically. Now it might not happen depending on the way your Power BI is configured. And if you're working with a different data set, you might have to create this relationship manually. Just to show you how to do that, let me delete it. To create a relationship, I simply have to drag it. So I hold one of these and then drag it and keep it on top of the other one. It doesn't matter which direction you go in. It will automatically detect the direction. So this becomes a one-to-many, which means that the product ID table has each product ID coming only one time, and the sales table has each product ID coming multiple times. Okay, now we don't want to do a merge, and we want to use a single measure to get the same result. So what we do here is, I will just expand the tables. We go to new measure, and we will say that the total sales is equal to the sum x of my sales table. And the expression that we are writing here is my quantity multiplied by the list price. But since we are multiplying it by the list price, which happens to be in a different table, we have to use related. And you can see that it asks you which one would you like to select. We want to select the list price like this, and we get the total sales. Let me quickly make a table. We'll keep the product ID and the total sales in it. And as you can see, we get the exact same result. So quickly going back to the Excel file that we had created originally, you can see that we have 690, 1800, 1000, 1275, and 1050. We had done the same thing when we had done the merge here. And we also did the same thing in another file where we created a relationship and used related. In case you would like to do this directly on the Excel. Let me also show you how to use Power Pivot for this. Let me make a copy of the file. And let's call this Power Pivot. And I want to delete all these things. Perfect. Step number 1, we will select the data and we will insert a table. And we will also name the table something more relevant. We'll call it product underscore ID. We'll do the same thing for sales as well. So insert table, and then we go to the table name and we will call it my sales. Now we want to add both of these to the data model. An easy way of doing that is to simply go to insert, create a pivot table from either one of the tables. But while you're creating a pivot table, select this option called add this data to the data model. And now you notice that if I go to all, both of these are visible. But then we still have to create a relationship between them. To do that, we go to Power Pivot, and then we select Manage. And here in the diagram view, I can see both the tables here. Okay, I can only see one of these. Let me check that. Let me make sure that I've selected the product ID and added to the data model as well. Let's do that. Okay, one more time. When we go to diagram view, you can see both the tables are there. Let's create a relationship. Just like we did it on Power BI, we drag and drop like this. It creates a one-to-many relationship. We close it. And on my pivot, I'm going to select my product ID. We will select our quantity and our list price like this. Of course, we want to multiply these. So we go to measure and we create a new measure. Let's call the new measure total sales. And this is equal to nothing but sum x. The table is my sales table. The expression would be my quantity multiplied by the related list price like this. We check the formula, everything seems to be okay. And as you can see, we get the same result. So we have seen how to do it in Excel using VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP or SUMIF, how to do it in Excel using Power Pivot, which is essentially the same as Power BI related after creating a relationship. And we've also seen how to use Power Query for this. All of these are important because for different projects, you might use any one of these. So don't focus just on one. It's important to learn all of these different methods to achieve the same result.